Hello and welcome to Positive Psychology Meets Positive Technology, how to turn school stress into resilience. I am Tamara Lechner and I am the director of the Center for Positive Education. I have a really cool job where I get to go around the world and help educators implement whole school well-being programs. I've also written a book, The Happiness Reset, What to Do When Nothing Makes You Happy, that couples the days of the week with positive psychology interventions, and it is designed just to help you hack happiness. I am so grateful that you've carved out the time today to listen to this webinar, and I hope that you get tons of useful tips out of it. In my work, we often hear of people talking about the downside of technology, and so today I really wanted to highlight how technology can be part of the solution. It is not just part of the problem. So today we're going to talk about stress. We're going to explore who is stressed, what is stress, is it all equal, is resilience actually an upside to stress, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the well-being science of positive education. This should help you to understand why using your strengths can improve relationships and decrease stress in those relationships. And as I said, we're going to talk about how tech makes it better. And I'm going to give you some useful tips to get started and ideas on how you can stress better. So before we begin, I always ask everybody to prime yourself for learning, which means shut down those browsers, turn off anything that's going to be a distraction, and just let go of whatever you did before you got here today, knowing that we've got this time together, and it's going to be better if you're focusing on one thing. As teachers, you have chosen to steward the lives of other human beings. With that choice comes joyous wonder and endless heartfelt struggle. This is a quote by my friend Maria Serwa, and it really is powerful for teachers. You started this job because you wanted to impact lives, and yet sometimes it feels really heavy, and we're going to talk about strategies to get rid of that heaviness today. Who is stressed? We know that teachers are stressed. Teaching is emotional. It's one of the only fields where every single day you have to have a relationship with 25 to 30 people all day. You need to be on. Teaching can be rewarding and it can be depleting. Teaching involves conflict and overwhelm and disappointment and frustration. And these are important to learning, but they're also all hallmarks of stress. We know that a little bit of striving and stressing is really good for people, but we also know that stress can be an obstacle to learning. And so one of the questions we're going to consider today is, when is stress too much? When describing stress in their own words, 61% of educators said their work feels stressful almost all the time. 50% said they don't have the same enthusiasm that they had when they started teaching. And one study that looked at the coping abilities of teachers found that only 7% of teachers actually had in their toolkit skills and strategies to help them cope. Now, I'm not here to tell you that your life as a teacher is filled with stress and that it's terrible and horrible. What I'm here to do is help you understand that there's some really great things out there that can help you to stress in a way that is useful. But before I get to that, let's think about who else is stressed. We know that students are stressed. Approximately 4.4 million school-aged kids are diagnosed with anxiety, and 1.9 million are diagnosed beyond that, right to clinical depression. These stats from the Child Mind Institute show that the onset of a lot of these mental health challenges are while students are in school. So they're starting when kids are 6 years old and up to 15 years old. This is where we start to see the symptoms. This means that you have a great opportunity to impact these numbers because you see these kids probably more than their parents. But why do you think that kids have this much stress today? If you've got access to the chat box, feel free to type in why you think kids are so stressed. One of the answers that we get is screens, technology, busy lives, I see, yep. And so we know there's a lot of reasons for the stress, but we're going to work with how to stress better. Who else is stressed? We know the teachers are stressed. We know the students are stressed, but the parents are also stressed. Children today are more likely to grow up with a household where two parents are working, and nearly half of two-parent families report a sharp increase in their stress levels. We know that prescriptions for anti-stress medications have increased and increased over the past 20 years. And these parents want to help their kids with their stress, but often this stress is trickling down from parent to child. We also know for teachers that many of you are both parents and teachers, so you're kind of dealing with double stress. So let's talk about exactly what stress is. I write for the Chopra Center, and Deepak describes stress as an obstacle getting between you and something that you want. So you might think of stress as traffic, as your teenager not wanting to get out of bed in the morning, or your computer crashing in the middle of writing report cards. Our body has two systems for dealing with stress, and one is like a brake, and the other is like a gas pedal. We have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. So on the one side, on the gas pedal, we have fight, flight, freeze. This is what happens when something goes really, really wrong and your body shuts right down. On the other side, we have the rest and digest, which is like a brake that slows everything down. I'm not going to go deeply into the science. You don't need to know why it happens. What you need to know is that when a teacher experiences stress, it can lead to all of these horrible outcomes if it isn't dealt with properly. We see health and relationship issues. We see conflict. What we know is that these systems in our body that enable us to stress for a good reason secrete all kinds of hormones and chemicals. Our body is flooded with them. But it only takes 90 seconds to get rid of those chemicals. And I want you to ask yourself, have you ever been angry for longer than 90 seconds? Probably all of you are saying yes. I know that when people get angry or sad, have a strong emotion, it can last for hours or days, sometimes even weeks. So the upside of knowing this is we can hack these systems to help us get past any stress in our lives that isn't useful stress. This is a friend of mine, Kelly McGonigal, and Kelly is famous for her book, The Upside of Stress, where she talks about stress as being really in two different mindsets. The first mindset would say stress does not have to be detrimental. It can be positive. It can be a challenge, and it can help you to feel better and to motivate you. Most people think of stress as something that makes things more difficult, but in fact, when you look at this graph, we see that some stress actually optimizes your performance. We know with athletes, for example, that if they're not feeling a little bit of stress, they're not going to perform to the same level as they would if they didn't have that stress. So there is a reason for all of those chemicals to happen in our body. The challenge is when we get stuck, when that 90 seconds is prolonged and all of a sudden we're not able to get out of that stress pattern. In fact, the stress becomes constant. And that leads to exhaustion and a breakdown of your immune system. And basically, it as far as your physical health goes, it decreases your blood circulation. It increases your weight gain because often you have more of your insulin depleted because your body's just not working the way that it should be. So the real point here is to understand that we do need to have a little stress. One example that I often think of is when a child for the first time steps out on a road and almost gets hit by a car. That little zoom of chemical emotion that you get reminds you to never do that again. It is useful. We just need to not have that emotion in the classroom when something goes wrong, at home when our teen won't get out of bed, or when we're in traffic and running late. So positive education provides strategies to deal with stress. But what exactly is positive education? We define positive education as the application of well-being science coupled with the principles of positive psychology inside an education setting. And the goals are enhancing student, staff, and community well-being while reducing ill-being. I think it's really important to highlight we're not just talking about the kids, we're talking about the staff and we're talking about the community, because all of the research that positive education has shows it doesn't work if we're just doing it to or at the students. This needs to be modeled and a lived experience for the kids. Now, the name positive education is pretty unfortunate. I am an entrepreneur, and whoever branded this science was crazy. Positive education leads people to think that we are saying you should be happy all the time, that every child should win, that there should be no failure. Positive makes people think that we are saying there are good emotions and bad emotions. But it isn't all sparkles and unicorns, like the name implies. We're a pretty deep science, and the science begins with this graph of PERMA V. And these are the domains that really focus our positive psychology actions. So we're going to unpack each of these 6 domains, and I'm going to give you one quick and easy action that you can do personally or with your family or with your class for each one of these. And I want you to note that they are wrapped with mindfulness and strengths. Mindfulness is just that ability to reflect on who you are and how you interact with the people around you in the world. And strengths reminds us that everybody has strengths and that when you are working from your strengths, you are more able to access all of these domains. So the P stands for positivity. Positivity is also known as positive emotions, but that one can be a little bit hard to comprehend because positive emotions sometimes leads someone to believe that you should only be happy and joyful and excited and enthusiastic. Actually, when we're talking about positive emotions, we are hoping that students will get a really strong well-being literacy, meaning that they can feel and name a whole bunch of emotions. What we want to teach students and even teachers is how to prolong the emotions that feel good. That's good for your body, and we know that it helps your health and it helps your mental health. But we also want you to be able to experience the emotions that don't feel good and have tactics to move through them quickly. Those emotions are there for a reason, and we're certainly not telling anybody not to have them. We just don't want anybody to get stuck there. I often use the idea of a spiral. Your emotions are never stagnant. They're always changing and moving. So they can be spiraling up or they can be spiraling down. And my real goal is to make sure that people recognize in a moment if they are spiraling up or spiraling down. So I'm going to ask you to quickly check in with yourself. right now, at this point in your day, which way are your emotions spiraling? I can say for myself, I'm kind of going back and forth because it's the end of my day. I'm a little bit tired, but I'm excited to be talking to you all. And so I can feel this upward and downward spiral. The point of positivity is just to get really comfortable with all of those emotions, because your emotions affect your students and your colleagues. Practicing positive leadership is important because positivity is heliotropic. And heliotropic is just a big fancy word to say that we move towards things that feel good. So in the plant world, we have these tulips moving towards the sunshine. But in your relationships with students and colleagues at school, people want to be around people who feel like the sunshine. So here's the technology tip for this one. Often we are told to put down your phones and to really make contact in a different way. And of course, the best way to connect with anybody is when you can make eye contact or physical contact. Those are your top two ways. But in the absence of that, you can use your device to connect properly. And so the way that I recommend that people do this is just by shooting a gratitude text to somebody who has made your day better. So right now, you could send a text to whoever's watching your kids while you're listening to this webinar, or whoever is cooking your dinner, or the person who is going to be helping you tomorrow in your class. Another way that we do this with our family, we live on the opposite coast from most of our family, and we just take pictures of things going on in our day-to-day life, and without having to curate the content or think about a long email, we just send a quick picture. It allows us to feel connected. My mom can see what I wore when I went out for dinner and feel like she's here, even though she's really far away. Moving on to our next domain, we're going to talk about engagement. Engagement is the domain where we teach topics like flow and focus, curiosity, motivation, and concentration. This is a neat little diagram that kind of shows how flow might show up in your classroom. So we have a match of skill level and challenge level. And when those two things meet in that top upper corner, in the upper right, you have flow. This means that things are just hard enough and you have just enough skill to make it really rewarding. In your job, we know the best way to find flow is to minimize distractions, which can be really hard in a school setting. You are constantly getting interrupted and having to put out fires that you didn't know you were going to have. But as best you can, minimize those distractions. One way is by closing all the browsers on your computer, turning off the notifications on your phone, putting your social apps at the back of your screen. Other ways for finding flow, getting feedback, connecting goals to your values. So if you have goals, you need to know that they are meaningful to you. Managing a balance between your own skill and challenge. You don't want to teach French class if you don't feel comfortable speaking French. These flow opportunities also really foster a team environment. One of the great ways I like to think about team flow is when you think of an orchestra. And again, when you feel like you are doing something hard and doing it well, it increases your sense of autonomy. And this really helps you to do your job better. One thing that I encourage you to do is reflect on strengths that you have that help you to increase your flow at work. This is one app that I love. This app grows a tree as you stay away from using your phone. And so I would encourage you to install this app. It's called Forest app. It's a free app, And you can set what you want to use and what you don't want to use on your phone. And it simply prompts you that the tree will not keep growing if you use the app. So a really great one to help you stay engaged in the way that you want to. Moving on to the third domain. This is the domain of relationships. According to the Center for the Developing Child out of Harvard, relationships are one of the most powerful buffers to stress. I know that if I had to pick one of these 6 domains to focus on, it would always be relationships. Relationships are not all created equal. This is Brené Brown, and you probably recognize her. She's been all over the world lately on Netflix and giving TED Talks. She started out researching shame and vulnerability, but her latest work is all about belonging and connection. And her definition of connection really speaks to me. She says, connection is when you feel seen and heard and valued for who you really are. And if you think about this in a classroom, we need to help our students understand the difference between fitting in, pretending to be different than they are, and actually belonging, feeling comfortable to show who they are to their classmates. I like to consider how relationships in school can be both a source of stress, but they can also be the solution. We know that when kids feel like they belong, they have higher self-worth, they're more motivated, they don't drop out as much, and they are more satisfied with their time at school. This is a video from the Go Zen suite. We love these videos, and they're part of our teaching tools that help teachers really teach these sciences. So I'm going to let you watch this video and then explain why it's so powerful.
Hello, Mr. Silver. Can I talk to you, please?
Sure, Mr. Diddly-Do.
Oh, you know what? Just see me after class. Okay, kids, today we're going to talk about a great inventor, Nikola Tesla. He was really brilliant, but a little eccentric. I can kind of relate.
I wonder what Mr. Diddly-Do wants to talk about. Did I forget an assignment? No, I turned everything in.
Sure, Tesla's responsible for electricity as we know it, but did you know he was also a pigeon lover?
Teachers don't tell you to see them after class unless there's... Oh no, it has to be a problem. It has to be my last assignment.
Okay, let's see if we can recreate this. Oh, ouch. Don't try this at home.
Maybe I should pretend to forget he asked to see me. I know what it's about. I don't ask enough questions in class. That has to be it.
Oh, hey, Sam, I wanted to speak with you, remember?
Yes, Mr. Diddly-Do?
I saw you playing soccer with some friends the other day. I think you should try out for the team.
Yeah. Wait, that's all you wanted to talk to me about?
Oh yeah, that's it.
I love that video because it shows all the ways that communication can go wrong. The teacher had the best of intention. He wanted to tell his student something good, a strength that he had noticed. But the student's stress response told him this other story that left him not primed to be learning or listening in class because he was so focused on what was going on in his head. Relationships and meaning together enable students to feel like they belong, like they matter, like they have a purpose. It's so important to ensure that kids feel like they are members of the community. And that does begin with the adults modeling how they are a member who belongs in the community. When we take a foundation of strong attachment, and I always like Gordon Neufeld's work on attachment, then we're able to start with this belonging, and truly at that point no child is left behind. This is where digital citizenship and technology like the ones that Hapara uses become really important, because we're enabling communication that works rather than getting into those problems that we saw highlighted in that video. So that's a perfect segue into the meaning, because relationships and meaning together are even more powerful. Meaning is the domain where we explore, why am I here? What's the purpose of my life? Living intentionally, self-worth, autonomy, character strengths, and personal values. We know that meaning buffers stress until it doesn't. This cartoon always cracks me up, and I feel for the teachers because your resilience does get worn down, and it's important to have strategies in your toolkit so that when you're feeling like the owl on the right, you can pick yourself up or you can pick up your peers. We know that purpose is one of the ways, if you keep reminding yourself why you chose the work that you chose. People who identify a source of meaning and purpose, especially in their work, are happier, they're healthier, they're more resilient, they cope with stress better, and they can pursue goals more easily. Now, I do want to take a pause and just talk about that word resilience, because we're hearing a lot about resilience, and often when people say resilience, they say, oh, it's just bouncing back. At the Center for Positive Education, we want to be really clear that resilience is often not bouncy. Resilience is getting over something hard and being stronger because you went through it. One of our favorite meaning and purpose apps is the Hapify app. Again, available on the App Store. It's really a cool way to explore the questions around how do I find purpose, or actually, do I make purpose? And although there's no answer, there's certainly some great prompts to help you figure it out inside the Hapify app. Moving on to achievement. Achievement is one of those well-being topics that people often say, why is achievement in here? Isn't happiness supposed to come regardless of achievement or not achieving? But we know from all of the research that when people don't have goals, they are not as happy. And so under this domain, we talk about grit and persistence, we talk about habit formation, and we look at mindset. In students, this isn't about the grade. We talk about academic tenacity, which is just that ability to work hard on a goal and withstand challenges and persevere. Our friend Angela Duckworth, who again is TED Talk famous, likes to talk about concepts that support achievement. And these include decision-making, growth mindset, goal orientation, grit and persistence, hope. Hope is the one positive emotion that you can have even at negative times. And so hope is really powerful here. And then of course, her work centered on deliberate practice. One of the things that I love that Angela says is a simple formula for achievement. And so her formula is a little math equation. She says talent multiplied by effort equals skill. Skill multiplied by effort equals achievement. Therefore, while talent counts, effort counts twice. And I think that's a great one to share with your students. This is a technology that I love when we're looking at results. Flourish is a suite of well-being measurement tools. And so there's the Flourish diagnostic tool and the Flourishing at School tool. These are psychosocial assessments that look at PERMA-V. So they measure your positive emotions, your engagement, your relationships, your sense of meaning, your accomplishment, and your vitality, which in this case, like many students, we're seeing somebody who's short on sleep. We know that when you have a platform to measure this type of well-being science, we're able to work on the things that a student is depleted by, and we're also able to work as a team. So we did this survey at one school that I work with, and we were able to really see that there were certain grade groups that were thriving. In that school in particular, grade 10 was really quite depleted. And so rather than focusing all our well-being efforts on the whole school, we put more attention towards the grade 10 students. So again, this is where big data can inform our practice rather than guessing. Does everybody need grit? Does everybody need to meditate? It's nice to work using an informed method. Our final category is the V for vitality. Vitality is what I think of as the base of Maslow's pyramid. We need to have sleep and nutrition and exercise in order to function well. But the other domains that we include in here are body-mind connection and mindfulness. There is certainly no shortage of apps to help you track all of these things. In the bottom left corner of your screen, we have the Insight Timer. This is a free meditation app that I absolutely love. We have Headspace, we have Calm, we have 10% Happier. There's apps like Noom. I use one that is called 7 Minutes. That is a 7-minute workout every day. Certainly, this is one way that technology has really helped us to improve our well-being. Well-being is kind of like the weather. And so when I have this image of all of these different apps, it reminds me of that connection of well-being and the weather. And the reason that I say that is, although there's parts of the weather that we can measure, so we can measure the temperature and we can measure the rainfall, we can measure the wind, but we can't always agree on one good weather. It's contextual. When I'm skiing, I'd like it to be snowy, but with some sun. When it's summer, I would like it to be hot, but maybe not too hot if I'm going to go on a hike. So there isn't one good weather. The same is true with well-being. There isn't one correct well-being. When you go through those domains, PERMA V, you'll recognize a whole group of ingredients for well-being, but the harder part is figuring out how you combine the ingredients to make the right recipe for well-being for you. So we talked about stress. We talked about it as a gas pedal and a brake. And I want to remind you of your power to choose gas or brake. And I'm going to give you a quick strategy for when you're having trouble getting out of that fight, flight, freeze. Fight, flight, freeze is that feeling of absolute distress where your heart rate goes up and your mouth maybe gets dry. Often you have to use the bathroom. Think of public speaking. That's that fight, flight, freeze response. But if you practice a simple breathing strategy, it actually turns it off entirely. I learned this strategy from a deep diver in Australia who could actually hold his breath and swim down for 7 minutes. And he used this strategy every time before he began his deep diving. And all it is inhaling for 6 counts and exhaling for 7 counts as though you were breathing through a straw. So all you do is inhale, a slow, deep inhale, doesn't matter if it's through your nose or your mouth, for 6 counts, and then exhale slowly as though you're breathing through a straw, so that time through your mouth, for 7 counts. That is an immediate shutdown on that 90 seconds of stress. And I encourage you to share this with your students. If they get into that stress response where they're no longer able to focus and do well in your class, have them breathe. We can always take 90 seconds and breathe those chemicals out. We also talked about why resilience is the upside of stress. And I guess the question that I often ask when I'm doing these webinars or talking to a group of educators is, can you become resilient if you don't experience something stressful in your life? I think the answer is no, and I don't imagine that we've actually ever been able to test this because everybody has stress. So resilience is what happens when you deal with stress well and become stronger. It's often being called post-traumatic growth in these days. Positive education offers stress-busting strategies, and these are those positive psychology exercises like that little gratitude text, like the breathing. For relationships, we have strategies to help students connect better. Knowing that you've got these tools in your toolkit makes life a little simpler. Tech is important and it makes it better. Kids today are not going to put technology away. It is the water that they are swimming in and they don't know any different. I work with a lot of schools who are actually removing technology from the schools, and I think it's crazy. I think that what we need to do is model effective use of technology, show students how to use it in a smart way, teach them the difference between using technology and having technology use you. And finally, how we start with positive education is just picking one simple practice and doing it. It could be writing a gratitude letter to a colleague or that gratitude text that we started. It could be beginning a meditation practice or trying that breathing exercise before you get out of the car when you go to work. One simple practice moves you one step closer to being the you that you want to be at school. And like we said in that slide about the heliotropic effect, when you feel better, your students will also feel better. I'm going to open it now to any questions that anybody might have about the science of positive education. Feel free just to type them in your chat box. All right, so I love this question. Someone has asked, what is the difference between SEL and positive education? And this is a question that I get quite regularly. And I think the short answer is SEL is part of positive education. If you go back to the slide that we talked about that had the PERMA, kind of like pieces of pie, SEL deals with one slice of pie. They're based on teaching kids emotional intelligence and emotional literacy, which is really important. It's important for relationships, it's important for engagement, but it's really one access point. Positive education has 6 access points because we're talking about 6 different domains that we're teaching these interventions and strategies through. The other thing that can be different depending on who's implementing SEL versus positive education is positive education starts with the faculty, the teachers, the leadership. It's not student facing first. Why? Because you can't learn gratitude from an ungrateful teacher. You can't learn how to persevere from someone who gives up. And so it's most important in positive education that the staff are living and actually using positive psychology interventions before any explicit teaching happens. And we like to see both explicit and implicit teaching. A great example of this, one of the things we teach is character strengths. There's 24 universal character strengths that everybody has. However, some of them we use more than others. Those are our signature strengths. And when you get to use your signature strength, it really directly impacts your well-being. If a teacher notices a student using their signature strength, then both people's well-being, the teacher who spotted it and the student who is using it, are increased. And so knowing strategies like these for teaching really enable students to thrive? It's a great question. And so character strengths, again, wouldn't be part of SEL, although some SEL providers would use them. And I think that's where it gets really blurry. I think having as many tools in your educator toolkit as possible to help students learn how to stress better, because we are going to have stress. We know life comes with stress, and it's really important just to get used to living with it and working through it, and actually coming out on the other side with a great story of how something hard made you stronger and more resilient, which is why we often say that our job is to help schools turn stress into resilience. But what I would like to do is just tell you about one thing that I have going on at the Center for Positive Education right now. We are beginning to take registrations for our summer intensive, which is a certification that enables you to teach positive education, and also to use our suite of tools to help you help your students to thrive. So I hope you'll check out our website, and feel free, if you have any questions, to reach out to me. I am on social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, and I would love to connect with you there and help you to help your students be happier. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciated it.